This year, Harvard University received 43,330 applications for the class of 223. Out of those 43,333, only 1,950 were accepted, meaning 41,380 students received a rejection letter from Harvard. That's roughly 95% of all applicants. 2 decades ago, getting into a selective college was much less competitive than it is today. For the class of 2001, Harvard and Stanford's acceptance rates were 12.3% and 15.5% respectively. For the class of 2021, Stanford posted 4.7% acceptance rate, while Harvard's was 5.2%. Consider NYU. In 2006, the acceptance rate was 36%. Today, that number has dropped to 16%. Increased global demand is making this process even more selective. More and more international students are applying to American universities, much more than 2 decades ago. In the 2000-2001 academic year, 547,867 international students were studying in the U.S. In the 2018-2019 school year, this number reached 1.09 million. The United States hosts nearly 1 out of every 4 international students enrolled worldwide. All these accepted and rejected students go through pretty much the same thing, the application process. Writing essays, taking tours, and preparing for the famous, or should we say infamous, SAT, which for years now has been criticized for allegedly favoring socio-economically privileged students. But the College Board has been testing something they call the Adversity Index, an indicator designed to take into consideration the socioeconomic advantages or disadvantages of each student. But how does it work exactly, and is it truly fair? You're watching Explore Mode, and today we're diving into the Adversity Index and its potential effect on college admissions in the US. But before we get into the controversy of this new phenomenon the College Board has brought in, let us give you a little crash course on the history of the SAT. SAT stands for Scholastic Aptitude Test, or Scholastic Assessment Test. Its roots lie in the First World War. The United States needed soldiers who were mentally competent. But at the time, many draftees were uneducated and unfit for certain positions within the Army. That's where Robert Yerkes, a leading member of the American Psychological Association, convinced the Army to allow him to administer IQ tests to recruits. Yerkes was tasked with developing a test that would help the Army categorize individuals based on their intellectual abilities. This test was called the Army Alpha Test. Let's jump into an Express Explore explanation. Start the clock. The Army Alpha was a written test with multiple choice and true or false questions, and it tested an individual's ability to follow directions, arithmetic, and analogies. There were 8 sections. These included arithmetical problems, practical judgment problems, synonym-antonym items, and more. The Army Beta test was its brother test and was developed for recruits who spoke little to no English or who had trouble reading and writing. The test used pictures and symbols for instructions and tested things like mazes and patterns. The tests were made to be pretty comparable, so the soldiers each received a letter grade. Those with a low grade were dismissed, while those with the highest grades were trained to be officers. Soldiers in the middle were given simple tasks to do. The Army Alpha and Beta became the first mass-administered IQ tests. Once the war ended, Yerkes' assistant, Carl Brigham, a professor at Princeton, adapted the Army Alpha into a college admissions test for the College Board, creating the early version of the SAT. One thing must be said about Carl Brigham. He was a self-proclaimed racist. When he created this test, Brigham was an active member of the Eugenics Society. The society believed in the supremacy of the white race and in evangelizing the preservation of whiteness and racial purity. Brigham also wrote a book discussing the inferiority of immigrants and black people to white people. When he saw the results of the Army test, he concluded that black people, Italians, and Jews were genetically ineducable. He did not take into consideration the fact that many minority groups did not have access to education. In 1926, the SAT was given experimentally to a few thousand college applicants. In 1933, the then president of Harvard, James Bryant Conant, decided to start a new scholarship program and was searching for a test to evaluate potential candidates. He charged Assistant Dean Henry Chauncey with this task. Chauncey met Brigham and recommended to Conant that the SAT be used. Conant liked it because he believed it tested the applicant's intelligence while disregarding where they went to high school. In 1938, Chauncey convinced members of the College Board to use the SAT as an exam for scholarship applicants. One thing led to another, and in 1948, after the Educational Testing Service was chartered, the SAT was on its way to becoming an admission service device used by millions. When the test was first started, takers weren't expected to even finish it. The exam had 315 questions and a time limit of 97 minutes. The exam also hadn't yet been split into math and verbal sections. In 2005, an essay section was added where students are presented with a thesis that they can defend or reject and have 25 minutes to complete. The essay section remains an optional part of the exam today. That year, the math section was also expanded to cover Algebra 2. In 2009, SAT policies changed. The College Board added a new policy allowing students to only send their best SAT scores to schools they were applying to. Finally, a few years ago, the SAT went back to its old 1,600-point scoring system. In addition, a calculator math section was added. The SAT is constantly changing, always adapting to the latest educational standards. But is the test a true reflection of the taker's academic competence? Well, the simple answer is no. There are many elements that contribute to a student's academic performance. For one, wealth inequality has proven to be an influential factor in SAT scores across the U.S. According to the Wall Street Journal, 2016 high school graduates from households with incomes of $200,000 or higher were reported to average 250 points higher on the SAT than students whose household incomes were less than $20,000. The Adversity Index is designed to address this problem. Formerly known as an environmental context dashboard and dubbed by news outlets as an adversity index, it's a list of factors that take into account a student's socio-economic background when looking at their SAT scores. The College Board designed it with the goal of creating a more holistic profile of students. The index includes a disadvantage number scored between 1 and 100. Students will not be able to view this score and therefore will not know if it had an impact on their admissions decisions. The index was piloted by 10 colleges in 2017, and in 2018, 50 schools ranging from Ivy League to public institutions tested out the system. The Environmental Context Dashboard has 3 main subdivisions: SAT scores in context, contextual data on the student's neighborhood and high school, and information on the high school. SAT scores in context look at a student's SAT percentile in the context of their high school. Contextual data on the student's neighborhood and high school include typical family income, family structure, and crime rate. Information on the high school includes AP opportunity at the high school, the size of the senior class, location of the high school, and the number of students eligible for free or reduced price lunch at the school. Race and ethnicity are not considered. But this index doesn't cover everything. In an article published in The Conversation, Lee Patel, Associate Dean for Equity and Justice at the University of Pittsburgh, points out that the index ignores elements such as the effects of gentrification on poor communities and the fact that there are plenty of students living in dysfunctional two-parent families. On March 12, 2019, 50 people, including actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, were indicted in what would become the biggest bribery scandal in college history. Parents allegedly paid college admissions consultant William Rick Singer to bribe coaches at elite schools to recruit their children, despite their lack of ability to play the sport. The indictment also accuses test prep moderators of accepting bribes by Singer to correct the students' answers on the ACT and SAT, and even take the exam for them. The schools involved in this scandal are Yale, Georgetown, Stanford, UCLA, Wake Forest University, the University of Texas at Austin, the University of San Diego, the University of Southern California, UC Berkeley, and Northwestern University. The scandal was later nicknamed Operation Varsity Blues. Some institutions have found the Adversity Index very helpful. The College Board says it will expand the admission tool to 150 schools later in the year, and that all colleges will have access to it by 2020. Yale University reports benefiting from the index. Since 2018, the number of low-income and first-generation freshmen, in other words, a student who is the first of their family to attend a four-year college or university, has doubled to almost 20% of the incoming class. Harvard has also started using the index after being accused of discriminating against Asian American applicants. The data from the first 15 schools using the index shows an increase from 2 to 3% in the number of disadvantaged students admitted. Florida State University, one of the first schools to use this adversity score, reported a growing number of non-white freshmen in a state where race cannot be considered in admissions, 37 to 42%. The social circumstances that brought on the creation of the adversity index are understandable, but so is the skepticism and controversy surrounding it. Among the unanswered questions are, where is the College Board getting the data it uses for its index? How exactly is it interpreting this data? Should more criteria be considered in the index? And more importantly, will the adversity index truly help level the playing field for disadvantaged students, or will wealthy parents just find new ways to game the system? Thanks for watching Explore Mode. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to explore even more with us, make sure to hit the subscribe and bell button so you get a notification whenever we upload a new episode. See you next week, and in the meantime, keep your Explore Mode on.